The coffee grew cold in the cup as he stared at the envelope on the table. The sender, written in shaky handwriting, revealed a name he had tried to forget for 15 years. The letter had arrived without warning, like a ghost refusing to disappear. His fingers hesitated as he touched the paper. He opened it slowly. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a past he had buried. "I'm dying. I need to see you one last time." Before we dive into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. Andrew Miller contemplated the letter in his hands, feeling the world close in around him. 43 years old, marketing director of a major corporation, owner of a spacious penthouse in the city's most exclusive neighborhood, a life meticulously constructed far from the shadows of the past. And now, that piece of paper threatened to unravel everything he had so carefully built. "I'm dying. I need to see you one last time. Your father, Richard." 15 years. 15 years without a word, without a phone call, without any contact. 15 years nurturing his anger like a toxic plant, feeding it daily with bitter memories. And now his father resurfaced with those few words, written on cheap paper, sent from a small rural town Andrew barely remembered. The coffee had gone completely cold. Through the apartment window, the city continued its frantic pace, oblivious to the seismic shift happening within those walls. Andrew crumpled the letter forcefully, almost tearing the paper, then smoothed it out and reread it, as if expecting to find different words. At the bottom of the page, a phone number and an address. A house on the same street where he had grown up before everything fell apart. Before the lies, the betrayals, the broken promises. Before the abandonment. The clock on the wall read 7:40. In 20 minutes, he had an important meeting with new clients, an account that could mean a promotion. He couldn't afford to be late, much less distracted. He put the letter in his desk drawer, as if the gesture could also file away the feelings it had stirred. He took a gulp of the cold coffee, making a face. He stood up, adjusted his tie in front of the mirror, grabbed his imported leather briefcase and left. The day had to go on, just as it always had after his father left them. Life doesn't stop for ghosts. He had learned that lesson the hard way. But as he drove through the bustling city streets in his imported car, Richard's voice echoed in his mind as if he were sitting in the passenger seat. "You're going to be an important man someday, son. I know it." Empty words from a man who wasn't there to see anything happen, a man who chose another family, another child, another life, a man who now, conveniently on his deathbed, sought absolution. No, Andrew thought, gripping the steering wheel tightly, he doesn't even deserve a response. The meeting went exactly as planned. Andrew was known for his ability to concentrate, for his unwavering professionalism, for his skill at convincing any client. Today was no different. For 2 hours he managed to completely push away thoughts of the letter, his father, his past. It was only when he returned to his office, closing the door behind him, that reality hit him again. His assistant had left the day's messages on his desk, and at the top of the pile, a note that made his heart race. "Mr. Richard Miller called, says it's urgent, left the same number as the previous message." Andrew stared at those words, feeling anger rise in his throat like bile. The audacity. First a letter, now a phone call. As if 15 years could be erased so easily. He crumpled the message and threw it in the trash. There was no room in his life for this now. No room for a dying, repentant man seeking peace of mind before he left. Some bridges, once burned, should stay that way. He immersed himself in work, as he always did when he needed to ward off unwanted thoughts. Reports, spreadsheets, emails, calls. The clock read almost 9 in the evening when he finally shut down his computer. The office was silent. Most employees had already left. In the parking lot, sitting behind the wheel of his car, Andrew allowed himself a moment of hesitation. He could go home, open a bottle of wine, try to forget. Or he could call the number in the letter, just to say he wasn't interested in a reunion, that it was too late, just to put a definitive end to it. He picked up his cell phone, dialed the number before he could change his mind. 1, 2, 3 rings. He was about to hang up when a female voice answered. "Hello." It wasn't the voice he expected. For an instant, he remained silent. "Hello?" The voice on the other end repeated, now with a hint of impatience. I'm looking for Richard Miller," he finally said, his voice firmer than he felt. A brief silence. "Who's calling?" "Andrew. Andrew Miller." Another silence. Longer this time? Oh my God. The female voice seemed to tremble. "Andrew, Richard's son?" "Yes," he replied, feeling a strange tingling at the back of his neck. "Who is this?" "I'm Martha, his nurse. He's talked so much about you." She paused. "He'll be so happy to know you called." I just called to say I'm not interested in a reunion." Andrew cut her off, regaining his cold composure. "I received a letter, but I have nothing to say to him after all these years." The woman on the other end was silent for a few seconds. "I understand," she finally said, her voice now professional, restrained. "I'll inform him, but he's not doing well, Mr. Miller. The doctors have given him a few weeks. The cancer is very advanced." Cancer. The word hit Andrew like a punch to the gut. He imagined his father, the strong man who used to carry a small boy on his shoulders, reduced to a body consumed by illness. The image came unbidden and was pushed away just as quickly. "I'm sorry to hear that," he said, his voice distant. "But that doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change 15 years of absence." "He understands that," the nurse replied. "He just wanted to see you one last time, to ask for forgiveness in person." Forgiveness. Such a small word for something so immense. "Some things can't be fixed," Andrew said, feeling his throat tighten. "Some betrayals are definitive." "Perhaps," the woman agreed, "but maybe forgiveness isn't for him, but for yourself." The observation caught him off guard. Who was this woman to talk about what he needed? What did she know about abandoning a family, about growing up without a father, about building an entire life from the wreckage? "Good night," he said dryly, ending the conversation. He hung up the phone, feeling his heart pound against his chest. He started the car and drove home, faster than he should have. The city lights blurred past the window, like the thoughts in his mind. He arrived at the apartment and went straight to the bar. He poured himself a double whiskey, neat. He drank it in one gulp, feeling the liquid burn his throat. He poured himself another. Sitting on the leather sofa, in the silence of the meticulously decorated apartment, Andrew allowed himself, for the first time in years, to remember. Not the carefully selected memories he kept, the fights, the discovered lies, the abandonment, but the other ones, those he had buried deep. His father teaching him to ride a bike, afternoons fishing at the lake, the large calloused hand holding his small soft one as they crossed the street, the smell of aftershave when he hugged him before bed, dangerous memories, memories that threatened the carefully constructed edifice of his resentment. His cell phone rang, pulling him from his thoughts. He looked at the screen, an unknown number. The same as the previous call. His finger hovered over the display, hesitant. Finally, he answered. "Hello? Andrew?" The voice was weak, hoarse, almost unrecognizable, but still familiar. "Richard." "Yes," he replied, feeling his heart race. "Son." The word, laden with emotion, seemed difficult to pronounce. "It's so good to hear your voice." Andrew closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to feel anything but anger. "Why now?" he asked, his voice harsher than he intended. "Why after 15 years?" A sound from the other end of the line, a difficult breath, perhaps a sigh. "Because I'm dying," Richard replied simply. "And I don't want to leave carrying this burden. I don't want to leave without seeing you one last time." "You left 15 years ago," Andrew retorted. "You left when you decided your new family was more important, when you chose another child to love." "I know." Richard's voice trembled. "There's no justification for what I did. I messed everything up. I messed up our family. I hurt you in an unforgivable way." A pause, the sound of a painful cough. "But I need you to know the truth, all of it, before it's too late." "What truth?" Andrew felt irritation grow. "That you abandoned your family for an affair, that you preferred to start over with another woman, that you never looked back to see what you left behind." "It wasn't quite like that," Richard replied, his voice growing weaker. "There are things you don't know. Things your mother and I decided to hide to protect you. But now—" Another cough, more prolonged. "Now you deserve to know. You deserve to decide if you can forgive me based on the truth, not on the lie you've lived all these years." Andrew felt a shiver run down his spine. What truth could this be? What secret could be so important that his father, on his deathbed, needed to reveal it? "I'm listening," he finally said, trying to keep his voice firm. "Not over the phone," Richard replied. "Some things need to be said face to face." A pause, the sound of a difficult breath. "I know I'm asking too much after everything, but could you come see me? I promise that if after this you still want to hate me, I'll understand. Just let me see you one last time. Let me tell you what really happened." Andrew closed his eyes. He thought of everything he had built, how he had moved on, how he had managed to live without that man. He thought of the anger that had fueled him for so many years, which in a way propelled him to achieve everything he had today. He thought of how easy it would be to say no, hang up the phone, go on with his life, as if that call had never happened. But he also thought of the 8-year-old boy crying in the dark room, asking his mother why his father wouldn't come home anymore. He thought of the nights he slept, hugging his father's shirt, feeling its scent slowly fade. He thought of the important dates, graduations, achievements, birthdays, always with that absence that never stopped hurting. "Where are you?" he finally asked. "In the same town," Richard replied, a hint of hope in his weak voice. "On the same street, in the house where you spent your first years. Do you remember it?" How could he forget? The house with the big yard, the tree where his father had built a tree house, the tire swing hanging from the strongest branch. "I remember," he simply replied. You would come?" Richard asked, his voice almost pleading. Andrew took a deep breath. A part of him wanted to refuse, to maintain the safe distance he had established. Another part, the one he had buried along with the good memories, wanted to run there at that instant. "I need to think," he finally answered. "It's not an easy decision." "I understand," Richard said. "Take all the time you need. Just don't take too long, son. I don't have much time." The word son caused a tightening in Andrew's chest. How many times had he dreamed of hearing that voice call him that again? "I'll think about it," he repeated, trying to push away the emotion. "Good night." He hung up the phone before Richard could respond. He looked at the unfinished whiskey, feeling suddenly exhausted. Something had been shaken inside him, something he had held firmly in place for 15 years. Hidden truths, secrets to protect him. What did his father mean by that? What kind of truth could justify 15 years of absence? That night, Andrew slept poorly. He dreamed of the old house, of the boy he was, of the father he lost. He woke up several times, sweating, his heart racing, fragments of memories mixing with nightmares. In the morning, deep circles under his eyes highlighted his face in the bathroom mirror. He took a long shower, as if the water could wash away the confusion of feelings. It didn't work. At the office, he tried to concentrate on work. He had reports to review, a presentation to prepare, calls to return, but his mind constantly returned to the previous night's conversation. What truth could be so important, and why reveal it now after so long? At noon, his assistant lightly knocked on the door. "Mr. Miller, Mr. Davis is on the line, said it's about the multinational contract." Andrew nodded, trying to compose himself. "Thank you, Mary. You can transfer it." The call lasted almost an hour. Contract details, necessary adjustments, last-minute negotiations. Under normal circumstances, Andrew would be completely absorbed. Today, however, he responded mechanically, his mind wandering far away. When he finally hung up, he realized he had made his decision. In fact, perhaps he had made it the moment he heard his father's voice on the phone. He picked up his cell phone and dialed the number. "Hello?" It was the nurse again. "This is Andrew Miller. I'd like to speak with my father. He's resting now," she replied, her voice gentle. "The morning was difficult. The pain medication made him drowsy. Can I give him a message when he wakes up?" Andrew hesitated for a moment. "Tell him I'll be there tomorrow, around 10 in the morning." "Oh, that's wonderful," the nurse exclaimed, unable to hide her joy. "I'll inform him as soon as he wakes up. He'll be so happy, Mr. Miller, so happy. It's just a visit," he clarified, trying to maintain emotional distance. "I want to hear what he has to say, nothing more." Of course," she replied, but her tone of voice revealed she understood more than he admitted. "Until tomorrow, then." After hanging up, Andrew sat in his chair, feeling a mixture of anxiety and fear. What would he find in that house? What kind of man had his father become? What truth was so important that it needed to be revealed on his deathbed? The rest of the day passed like a fog. Andrew moved automatically, fulfilling his obligations without truly being present. That night at home, he packed a small bag. His hometown was just over 2 hours away by car. He didn't plan to stay long, perhaps just the day, but something told him to prepare for more. The next morning he woke up before his alarm rang. He had a quick coffee, grabbed his bag, and left. Traffic was light at that hour. The city was still waking up. Soon, he was on the highway. As he drove away from the metropolis, the landscape changed. Buildings gave way to open fields, the grey of concrete replaced by green vegetation. And with the change in scenery came memories, increasingly vivid, increasingly frequent. He remembered the road trips they used to take when he was a child, his father driving, his mother in the passenger seat humming along with the radio, him in the back seat counting the cows he saw in the pastures. Simple, happy times. Before everything fell apart. 2 hours passed almost without him noticing. Soon he was entering the small town, recognizing streets and establishments, some new, others exactly as he remembered. He drove straight to the street where he had grown up. His heart raced when he turned the corner. There it was, his childhood home, 2 stories. Walls that were once white, but now displayed a faded cream color, the same front yard, the same low fence. The old tree in the backyard, once imposing, seemed smaller now, older. The tire swing had disappeared. He parked in front, turned off the engine, but didn't get out immediately. He sat there, observing the house, feeling the weight of what he was about to do. Finally, he took a deep breath and got out of the car. He walked slowly to the gate, which creaked exactly as he remembered when he opened it. He climbed the 3 steps to the porch, his heart pounding against his chest. Before he could ring the doorbell, the door opened. The woman who appeared must have been around 40, dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, deep circles under kind eyes. She wore a nurse's uniform and smiled when she saw him. "You must be Andrew," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Martha. We spoke on the phone. Your father is waiting." Andrew shook her hand, feeling his throat tighten. How is he?" Martha's smile lessened a bit. Today is a good day. He managed to eat a little for breakfast and is conscious. She paused, choosing her words. But don't be alarmed by his appearance. The cancer and treatments, they've changed his physical self a lot. Andrew nodded, trying to prepare himself for what he would see. He followed Martha into the house, looking around. The living room was as he remembered, but emptier, as if many of the furniture pieces had been removed. The walls, once covered with pictures, now only displayed lighter marks where something had once hung. "He's in the downstairs bedroom," Martha explained, guiding him down a hallway. "Going upstairs has become difficult in recent months." They stopped before a closed door. Martha knocked lightly. "Richard, your son is here." A weak voice responded, something Andrew couldn't understand. Martha slowly opened the door and motioned for him to enter. "I'll leave you two alone," she said in a low voice. "I'll be in the kitchen if you need anything." Andrew swallowed hard and entered the room. At first, the dim light prevented him from seeing clearly. The curtains were partially closed, creating a cozy penumbra. Slowly, his eyes adjusted. The hospital bed occupied the center of the room. Beside it, a small table with medicines, a glass of water, a dim lamp. And in the bed, almost disappearing among the sheets, was his father, or what was left of him. The man Andrew remembered, tall, strong, with dark hair and an easy smile, had completely vanished. In his place, a skeletal body, yellowish skin stretched over bones, thin, white hair. Only the eyes, those deep brown eyes, remained the same, and they lit up when they saw Andrew. "Son," Richard whispered, extending a trembling hand. "You came." Andrew remained standing at the door for a few moments, unable to move. The sight was too shocking, too painful. Part of him wanted to flee, to go back to the car, to the big city, to the life he had built far from that man, that house, those memories. But another part, stronger than he imagined, propelled him to take a step forward, then another, until he reached the bedside. He didn't take the outstretched hand. He couldn't. Not yet. "I'm here," he said, his voice firmer than he expected. "I came to hear what you have to say." Richard slowly lowered his hand, a sad smile on his parched lips. "Thank you," he murmured. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Andrew admitted. A silence settled between them. Years of absence, of unspoken words, of repressed feelings, weighed in the air of the small room. "Are you well?" Richard finally asked, his eyes scanning his son from head to toe. "You look well, strong, healthy." "Yes, I am," Andrew replied without elaborating. "And you? When did you find out?" "The cancer?" Richard coughed lightly. "Almost a year ago. It started in my lung. When we found out, it had already spread to my liver, then to my bones." He made a vague gesture. "We tried everything. Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery. Nothing worked. It just postponed the inevitable." Andrew nodded, not knowing what to say. He had never imagined this reunion, much less under these circumstances. "Sit down," Richard requested, indicating a chair beside the bed. "Please, this will be a long conversation." Hesitantly, Andrew pulled up the chair and sat down. He kept a certain distance from the bed, as if fearing that proximity might break the fragile emotional barrier he had built. "You mentioned a truth," he began, getting straight to the point. "You said there was something I didn't know, something you and Mom hid from me. What is it?" Richard breathed deeply, a noisy, difficult sound. He adjusted himself on the pillows with visible effort. "First of all, I need you to know, what I'm about to tell you isn't to justify myself, it's not to erase what I did. It's just so you understand, so you have the truth, however painful it may be." Andrew crossed his arms, assuming a defensive posture. "I'm listening." Richard looked at the ceiling for a moment, as if organizing his thoughts, or perhaps gathering courage. "You were 8 years old when I left home," he began. "Do you remember that time?" "Every detail," Andrew replied, a touch of bitterness in his voice. "I remember hearing your arguments at night when you thought I was asleep. I remember the day you left with just one suitcase. I remember Mom crying for weeks. And I remember waiting every day after school for you to come back. You never did." Richard closed his eyes, the pain evident on his face. "Yes, that's pretty much how it happened, externally." He opened his eyes again, fixing them on Andrew. "But there's more, much more than that." He paused to take a sip of water from the glass beside the bed. His hands trembled so much that some spilled on the sheet. "Your mother and we had been having marital difficulties for some time. You were too young to notice, of course. We tried to hide it, keep up appearances. But the truth is, we grew apart. Our feelings changed." "That doesn't justify abandoning a child," Andrew interrupted, his voice harsh. "No, it doesn't justify it," Richard agreed. "Nothing would justify that. But I need you to understand the whole context." He took another deep breath. "I met someone else, someone at work. We started as friends then. Well, you can imagine. It was wrong. It was a betrayal. It was unforgivable. But it happened." Andrew felt the familiar anger bubble inside him. None of this was new. His mother had told him about the affair, about the other woman. It was exactly what he expected to hear. "If that's the big truth, I'm wasting my time here," he said, making a move to stand up. "No!" Richard exclaimed, extending his hand again, a touch of desperation in his voice. "That's just the beginning. Please, let me continue." Something in the plea, in the fragility of that once strong man, made Andrew hesitate. Reluctantly, he sat back down. "Continue," he said coldly. Richard breathed a sigh of relief. "I decided to leave home. I was going to file for divorce, start a new life. I was blinded by what I felt, not thinking clearly. But before I could do that, your mother found out. She found messages, no matter how. She confronted me." He stopped, seeming to choose his words carefully. "The argument was terrible, worse than any other we'd had. We said things, horrible things to each other. And then she made a threat. If I filed for divorce, if I left her, she would ensure I never saw you again." Andrew frowned, confused. What do you mean?" "She said she would tell you things, terrible things about me, that she would accuse me of." Richard closed his eyes, his voice choked. "Of abuse." The word dropped like a bomb in the silent room. Andrew felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under his feet. "What?" he whispered, astonished. Richard opened his eyes, glistening with unshed tears. "She threatened to report me for child abuse against you. She said she had proof, that she would convince you to confirm it, that I would go to jail, that I would lose everything, my freedom, my reputation, my job, everything." Andrew shook his head, incredulous. That can't be true. Mum would never do something like that." "I thought so too," Richard replied sadly. "I never imagined she could go that far. But desperation, resentment, they change people. And she was desperate to hurt me, to punish me for the betrayal." He paused. "At first I didn't believe it. I thought it was just a bluff," words said in the heat of the argument. "But then she showed me. She showed me pictures." "Pictures?" Andrew repeated, growing more and more confused. "What pictures?" Richard swallowed hard, visibly disturbed by the memory. "Pictures of marks on your body, small bruises that all kids get from playing, falling, getting hurt. But in her hands, with the right story, they could look like something else. And there was one in particular, from when you broke your arm, remember, falling from the tree in the backyard. I was alone with you that day. In the photo, your arm in a cast, you crying. It looked like something completely different from what it really was. Andrew remembered the accident. He was 7 years old. He'd climbed the treehouse, lost his balance, fell. His father rushed him to the hospital. It made no sense. "This is crazy," he said, standing up, unable to remain seated. "Why would Mom do something like that?" "Because she was devastated," Richard replied simply. "Because I had destroyed our marriage, our family. Because she wanted to punish me in the worst possible way." Andrew walked to the window, pulling back the curtain to look out at the backyard. The tree was there, older but still imposing, the spot where he had fallen, where his father had scooped him into his arms, running to the car, driving desperately to the hospital. His father, the man who now claimed he was falsely accused of abusing him. "I don't believe this," he finally said, turning to face Richard. "Mom loved you. She suffered when you left us. She cried for months. If this story were true, why would she be so devastated by your departure?" "Because in the end, despite everything, she still loved me," Richard replied, a sad smile on his lips. "And I think she regretted what she did. But by that point, it was too late. The threat was made, the decision taken." "What decision?" Richard adjusted himself in bed, a grimace of pain crossing his skeletal face. "I was given two options. Either I completely left your lives, no contact, no visits, nothing, or she would pursue the accusations." He took a deep breath. "What do you think I chose?" Andrew felt dizzy. It was too much to absorb, too much to believe. "You're telling me you left our lives, that you abandoned me to protect me?" His voice held a tone of disbelief, almost scorn. "How convenient." "Not just to protect you," Richard replied, unperturbed by the tone. "Also to protect myself, yes. I was afraid of being jailed for something I didn't do, afraid of what you would think of me if your mother put those ideas in your head. And I was. I was hurt, betrayed. Part of me wanted to punish your mother too." He looked directly into Andrew's eyes. "I'm not proud of it. I'm not saying I made the right choice. I'm just telling you what happened." Andrew sat back down, his legs suddenly weak. "And the other woman? The one you were having an affair with?" "She existed," Richard admitted. "And yes, I stayed with Marianne for a while after I left home. But it didn't last. Nothing lasts when it's built on ruins." A heavy silence fell over the room. Andrew tried to process everything he had heard. It was an absurd story, almost unbelievable. Could his mother, the loving woman who raised him alone, who always spoke of his father with a mix of sadness and contained anger, have been capable of something so vile? "Why are you telling me this now?" he finally asked. "After so many years." "Because I'm dying," Richard replied simply. "And I don't want to leave carrying this lie. I don't want you to spend the rest of your life believing you were abandoned because you weren't loved, because you weren't important. You were always the most important, Andrew. Always. If that's true, why did you never try to contact me before? Why wait until you're dying?" Richard lowered his eyes, guilt evident on his wrinkled face. "Out of fear, out of shame. Because, as time went on, it became increasingly difficult to explain." He paused. "And because there was the agreement. Your mother swore that if I tried any contact, she would make the accusation. I believed her. And then you grew up. You started your life. I thought maybe it was better to leave the past in the past." Andrew shook his head, confused, distressed. "And now? What do you expect from me now?" "That I believe this absurd story. That I forgive 15 years of abandonment based on an accusation against my mother, who isn't even here to defend herself." Richard sighed deeply. "I expect nothing. Perhaps a little understanding. But I don't even demand that. I just wanted you to know the truth, or at least my version of it." He extended his trembling hand again. "But there's something that might help you decide whether to believe it or not." "What?" "On the desk, in the top drawer. There's an envelope. Could you get it for me?" Andrew hesitated, but finally stood up and went to the old desk in the corner of the room. He opened the indicated drawer and found an envelope yellowed by time. He returned with it to the bed. "Open it," Richard asked. With hesitant fingers, Andrew opened the envelope. Inside, there were several sheets of paper. The first was a letter, in handwriting he immediately recognized as his mother's. He began to read, his heart beating faster and faster as he absorbed the words. "Richard, I don't know where to begin. Perhaps with regret, with remorse, with the shame of what I did. Years have passed since that terrible night, since the unforgivable words we exchanged, since the threat I made, a threat I never intended to carry out, but which I used as a weapon when I felt cornered, betrayed, abandoned. Time passes, but the guilt remains. I see our son growing up without you. I see the pain in his eyes when he talks about you, when he thinks about you. And I know I am responsible for it, not just you with your betrayal, but me with my cruel vengeance. I wanted to punish you for what you did. I wanted you to suffer as I suffered. And you suffered, I know, but our son also suffered. An innocent child, paying the price of our mistakes, of our pride. Many times I thought about telling him the truth. Many times I picked up the phone to call you, to say I was sorry, that we could try to fix it somehow. But the fear was always greater, fear of what he would think of me, fear of losing his love, which is all I have left. So I continued with the lie that you simply abandoned us, that you chose another family, another child. It's easier for him to hate you than to hate me, easier for me to live with this silent burden. I don't expect your forgiveness, not even understanding. I just wanted you to know that I acknowledge the wrong I did, the life I stole from both of you. Perhaps one day, when he is older, stronger, I will find the courage to tell him the truth. Until then, I will carry this secret as punishment for what I did, with remorse, Helen." The letter was dated 10 years ago. Andrew felt the world spin. In the other sheets of the envelope, he found copies of the photographs Richard had mentioned. Seen now, with adult eyes, they were clearly innocent. A boy with normal childhood bruises, a broken arm from a common accident. But they could, as his father said, be interpreted differently. She never told me," he murmured, his voice trembling. "She never said any of this." "I know," Richard replied softly. "I received that letter years ago. I even tried to find you after that, but I already had my own life," Andrew completed, remembering. "I was in college, far from the town. I had changed my phone, my address. Yes, and part of me was still afraid that you wouldn't believe me, that you would hate me even more for trying to slander your mother." Richard coughed painfully. "So I kept the letter, waiting for the right moment, which never came. Until now." Andrew stared at the letter in his hands, his mother's unmistakable handwriting, the words so different from everything she had said about his father over the years. The confession of a lie that had destroyed 3 lives. Why would she do that? He asked, more to himself than to Richard. Fear, resentment, revenge. Who knows? Richard replied sadly. We are all capable of terrible things when we are hurt. I betrayed her. I broke our vows, our trust. She reacted in the worst possible way. He paused. But in the end, I think we all lost. Especially you, son. Especially you. Andrew felt tears well up, blurring his vision. So many years feeding hatred, hurt, resentment. So many years believing he had been abandoned for not being enough, for not being loved enough. And now to discover that everything was based on a lie. She died thinking I'd never know, he said, his voice choked. She died 3 years ago, taking that secret with her. I'm so sorry, Richard murmured, for everything, for not being stronger, for not fighting harder, for letting fear control me. He extended his trembling hand once more. I don't expect your forgiveness, Andrew. I just wanted you to know the truth before it was too late, so you could go on with your life without the weight of this hatred, this hurt. So you would know that you were always loved, always. This time Andrew didn't hesitate. He took his father's hand, feeling how cold, fragile it was, the bones practically visible beneath the translucent skin. A sob escaped his throat, then another, and then the tears came, uncontrollable like a dam that finally burst. Richard also cried, silently, tears streaming down his hollowed cheeks. For a long time, they stayed like that, father and son, hands clasped, crying together for lost time, for the lies, for the secrets, for the love that never ceased to exist, only to be shown. The clock on the wall read almost noon when Andrew finally managed to compose himself. He reluctantly let go of his father's hand and wiped his face. What happened after? He asked, his voice still trembling. After you left home, you mentioned another family. Richard sighed. I stayed with Marianne, the woman I was having the affair with, for a while. But as I said, it didn't last. The relationship was tainted from the start, built on betrayal, on pain. We broke up less than a year later. He paused. I never married again. I never had other children. Andrew nodded slowly. And this house? How did you come back here? I never sold it. I just rented it out for many years. When I retired about 5 years ago, I decided to come back. It was the only place that still felt like home. A small, sad smile appeared on his lips. Ironically, it was shortly after your mother passed away. Perhaps, subconsciously, I knew I was free from the threat. Andrew looked around, noticing for the first time the details of the room. On the bedside table, there was a picture frame. He reached for it. It was a photo of himself, at 8 years old, smiling at the camera with a missing front tooth. You kept this? He asked, surprised. I kept many things, Richard replied. In the attic, there's a box with everything I managed to collect about you over the years. Newspaper clippings from when your high school basketball team won the regional championship, an article about the company where you work, mentioning your name as a promising executive, a copy of your college graduation invitation, which I got through a mutual friend. He smiled, a genuine smile this time. I never stopped following your life, even from afar. I never stopped being proud of you. Andrew felt his heart ache, all these years, believing he had been forgotten, erased from his father's life, and he had been there, in the shadows, following his steps, keeping memories. Why didn't you show up at Mom's funeral? He asked suddenly. You could have contacted me then. Richard lowered his eyes. I went to the funeral. I stood at the back of the church, left before it ended. You didn't see me. He hesitated. As for approaching you, I didn't know how. What would I say? Hello, I'm your father, whom you haven't seen in 15 years, whom you probably hate. And by the way, your mother, who just died, lied about why I left. He shook his head. It didn't seem like the right time. Andrew reflected on this for a moment. It made sense, in a sad way. How much time? He began hesitantly. How much time did the doctors say you have? Richard's expression darkened. Weeks. Maybe a month if we're lucky. The cancer is in my bones now, spreading rapidly. The pain. He made a vague gesture. Morphine helps, but I need increasingly larger doses. Andrew felt a new tightening in his chest. He had just reunited with his father, discovered the truth, had a chance to start over, only to lose him again, this time forever. It's not fair, he murmured. Life rarely is, Richard replied with a small smile. But I've had a good life, despite everything. And now, I have this. He gently squeezed Andrew's hand. You here, the chance to see you again, to tell you the truth, to tell you... His voice failed. To tell you how much I love you, son. Always have. Andrew couldn't respond. The emotion was too strong, words insufficient to express the whirlwind of feelings. Instead, he leaned in and for the first time in 15 years, hugged his father. It was an awkward, clumsy embrace. Andrew trying not to hurt the fragile body, Richard trying to reciprocate with the little strength he had. But for both, it was like going back in time, like finding something they had lost long ago, something essential, fundamental. When they finally pulled apart, both their eyes were moist again. I need to process all of this, Andrew said finally. It's a lot to absorb at once. I understand, Richard replied. You have every right to doubt, to question. I don't expect you to believe everything immediately or to forgive me just like that, overnight. It's not that, Andrew corrected quickly. I believe you. Mum's letter. He shook his head. It explains a lot. And in a way it makes sense. She was always intense, extremely protective. Richard nodded, understanding. She loved you in her own way. Never doubt that. I know, Andrew replied softly, just as I know now that you loved me too. A comfortable silence settled between them, not the heavy silence, laden with resentment and bitterness, but a silence of understanding, of acceptance, a silence of healing. What will you do now? Richard finally asked. Will you go back to the city? Andrew hesitated. He had planned to stay only a few hours, hear what his father had to say, and leave. But now... I have some vacation days accumulated, he replied slowly. Maybe I could stay a bit, if that's okay with you. Richard's face lit up with an almost childlike joy. Nothing would make me happier, he said. His voice choked. Nothing. And so began the last days of Richard Miller, days of increasing pain, of stronger and stronger medication, of a body rapidly deteriorating, but also days of reconciliation, of shared stories, of old photographs revisited, of unexpected laughter and necessary tears. Andrew called work, requested 2 weeks' leave. He vaguely explained that he had found his father after many years, that he was sick, that he needed time. His boss, surprisingly understanding, agreed without hesitation. He settled into his childhood bedroom, still largely preserved as he remembered it. The same bed, now too small for his adult body, the same shelves with old books, the same posters of bands that had long been forgotten by the world. During the day, he sat by his father's bed, listening to stories he had never known, sharing moments from his own life that Richard had missed. At night, he went up to the attic and explored the box his father had kept, an improvised museum of his life, viewed from a distance. He found newspaper clippings, some yellowed by time. His name circled in pen, always with a small comment beside it. My son, so proud. Look how he's growing. Photos taken from afar. Andrew at graduation, Andrew leaving the building where he worked, Andrew at a restaurant with colleagues. Small glimpses of the life his father had followed without being able to participate. And he discovered something else, something that deeply moved him. Letters, dozens of them, all addressed to him, none ever sent. Letters that told of Richard's daily life, of his thoughts, his regrets, his constant love for the son he couldn't see. Letters dated for birthdays, graduations, Christmases, all the important dates they had missed together. My dear son, one began, today you turn 15. I imagine what you must be like now, taller, probably your voice changing, perhaps already interested in girls. Your basketball team won the school tournament last month. I saw the picture in the local newspaper. I wanted so much to be there, cheering from the stands. And another. Today you graduate from high school. I found a distant spot at the ceremony, hidden among other parents. You looked so handsome in your cap and gown, so confident when you went up to the stage to receive your diploma. I cried like a baby, but no one noticed, thankfully. Each letter was a fragment of lost time, a window into the silent love his father had maintained, even from a distance. On a particularly difficult morning, when Richard could barely keep his eyes open due to the pain medication, Andrew had an idea. "Dad," he called softly, sitting on the edge of the bed. "There's something I'd like to do." Richard slowly opened his eyes, his gaze already a little distant, as if he was beginning to say goodbye. "What, son?" "I found the letters in the attic, the ones you wrote to me but never sent." A shadow of embarrassment crossed the skeletal face. "Oh, those, it was? It was a way to keep myself connected to you, even if only in thought." "I know," Andrew replied gently, "and I want to read them to you, all of them, so we can, in a way, live through those moments we missed together." Richard's eyes filled with tears. You would do that?" "Yes, starting now." And so, in the days that followed, as life slowly left Richard's body, Andrew read the letters, one after another in chronological order, the birthdays, the achievements, the important moments they had lived separately. Richard listened, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying silently. When the pain was too strong, Andrew paused, held his hand, waited for the medication to take effect. Then he continued, the words written years ago echoing in the silent room, filling the voids of 15 years of separation. As the days passed, it became clear that Richard's time was quickly running out. His body, already consumed by the disease, seemed to diminish even further. His skin, a yellowish tinge indicating liver failure, his breathing increasingly difficult, his periods of lucidity increasingly rare. One afternoon, after a long period of semi-consciousness, Richard opened his eyes with surprising clarity. "Andrew," he called, his voice almost inaudible. "Are you there?" "I'm here, Dad," Andrew replied, quickly approaching the bed. "I'm right here," Richard smiled weakly. "Good, that's good." He made an effort to raise his hand, which Andrew immediately took. "Thank you for being here, for giving me this gift, this time." Andrew squeezed the fragile hand, feeling the tears return. "I'm the one who should thank you," he said, his voice choked, "for telling me the truth, for never giving up on me, even from a distance." Richard nodded slightly. "I have something to ask you," he murmured, each word clearly requiring an enormous effort. When He didn't complete the sentence. He didn't need to. "What, Dad? What do you want me to do?" Richard breathed deeply, the sound noisy and difficult. "In the desk. Bottom drawer. There's an envelope. Addressed to you." He paused, gathering strength. "Read it. But only later. Not now." Andrew nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I promise." A small smile appeared on Richard's parched lips. "And one more thing." His voice was growing weaker, almost a whisper. "Be happy, son. Don't carry this resentment anymore. Not for me, nor for your mother. We both loved you, each in our own imperfect, human way. But it was love." Andrew couldn't contain the sob that escaped. "I know, Dad. I know." Richard smiled one last time, his eyes already beginning to lose focus. "I'm tired now. I'll rest a little." He closed his eyes slowly, his breathing calming. Andrew remained by his side, holding his hand, watching his chest rise and fall with increasing difficulty. That night, as the rain gently fell on the roof of the old house, Richard Miller passed away. Silently, without fanfare, like someone falling asleep after an exhausting day. Andrew was by his side, holding his hand until his last breath. There were no grand farewells, no dramatic declarations. Just a son watching over his father's sleep, a circle closing, a story coming to an end while another, a new one, transformed by truth and forgiveness, was just beginning. The funeral was simple, as Richard would have wanted. A few friends, some neighbors, former colleagues. Andrew, the sole family member, received condolences with a serenity that surprised himself. There was no more anger, no more resentment, just a calm acceptance, a peace he hadn't known in 15 years. After everyone had left, he stood alone before the freshly closed grave. The sky was clear, a blue almost offensively bright for the occasion. Birds sang in the nearby trees. Life went on, relentless in its beauty, indifferent to human suffering. "Goodbye, Dad," he murmured, placing a hand on the simple headstone. "Thank you for never giving up, for waiting until I was ready to listen, for loving me even when I didn't know." Back at the house, now his by right of inheritance, Andrew finally opened the envelope Richard had mentioned in his last lucid moments. Inside, he found a letter and some legal documents. "Dear son, if you are reading this, it means I have passed on. It also means we had the chance to reconcile, to share the truth, to start over, however briefly. For that, I am grateful. The house is now yours, as is all that I possess. It is not much, but I hope it holds some meaning for you, not as compensation for the lost years. Nothing could compensate for that, but as a symbol of continuity, of connection. I don't know what the future holds for you, what choices you will make from here, but I hope that among them is the choice for forgiveness. Forgiveness for me, for my cowardice, for my absence. Forgiveness for your mother, for her actions born of pain and desperation, and especially forgiveness for yourself, for any feelings of guilt you may carry, for any thought that you were not worthy of love. You were always loved, Andrew, by me, by your mother, each in our own imperfect human way. And that love, even distorted by circumstances, by weaknesses, by mistakes, never ceased to exist. Live, son, live fully. Free from the weight of the past, of resentment, of bitterness. Build your life on forgiveness, not on anger, on understanding, not on judgment. And if one day you have children of your own, tell them about me. Not as the hero I wasn't, nor as the villain you long believed me to be, but as a man, just a man, with his flaws and his triumphs, who never stopped loving his son, even when the whole world conspired to separate them, with eternal love. Your father, Richard." Andrew carefully folded the letter, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in years. The tears streaming down his face were not of pain, but of liberation, of acceptance, of forgiveness. In the days that followed, he made decisions that surprised himself. He resigned from his job in the big city. He sold his luxurious apartment. He decided to stay in the old house, at least for now. He needed time, space to rediscover who he was, now that the truth had transformed his story, his identity. He renovated the house, keeping its essence, but updating what needed to be changed. In what had been Richard's room, he created a small office. On the wall, he hung the photographs he found in the attic, images of his childhood, of his parents together, happy, before everything fell apart. Beside them, the newspaper clippings Richard had collected over the years, silent witnesses to a distant love. And in the desk drawer, he kept the letters, all of them, the ones his father had written to him, never sent, his mother's confession, Richard's last goodbye, an archive of truths, hard but necessary, that had finally freed 3 souls trapped in a web of lies, fear, and pride. 6 months after Richard's death, Andrew received an unexpected visit. Martha, the nurse who had cared for his father in his last days, knocked on his door one autumn afternoon. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," she said, a little nervous. But I was passing through town and thought I'd see how you were doing. Andrew smiled, genuinely happy to see her. I'm glad you came. Come in, please. Sitting on the porch, drinking coffee, they talked for a long time. About Richard, about the care she had given him, about how he spoke of his son with such pride even before they reunited. He changed in his last days, Martha commented, her gaze distant. After you appeared, it was as if he could finally pass in peace. Andrew nodded, moved. I'm glad we had that time. Brief, but precious. And you? She asked. How have you been? He looked at the garden, where the flowers he had planted were beginning to bloom. The old tree, witness to his childhood, his fall, the beginning of the whole story, was still there, imposing, full of life. I'm doing well, he replied, surprised by the sincerity of his answer. Really well. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Martha smiled, a warm smile that lit up her tired face. Your father would be very happy to hear that. Andrew smiled back, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. I think he knows, he said, simply. Somehow, I think he knows. That night, after Martha left with the promise to return soon, Andrew sat in the old rocking chair on the porch. He watched the starry sky, the same sky under which he had played as a child, under which his father had watched him from afar for years, under which he now found, finally, his way back home. Thank you, Dad, he thought, feeling a gentle breeze brush his face like a caress, for teaching me, even after you left, that forgiveness is not a gift we give to others, but to ourselves. The rocking of the chair was rhythmic, comforting. The night, serene. And for the first time in 15 years, Andrew Miller slept without the weight of anger, hurt, or resentment. He slept with the lightness of someone who had finally learned the true value of forgiveness. Because sometimes it's only when we lose someone that we truly understand how much we love them. And sometimes it's only when we forgive that we truly free ourselves. If this story touched your heart, like, comment, and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be remembered.